Welcome to Season 4 of Might in Motion, the podcast that champions motivation, momentum, mindfulness, and might. I'm Mariana Kinney, your host, bringing you conversations with inspiring leaders and innovators who challenge the status quo and push boundaries in their careers and lives. Whether you're here to grow, lead, or ignite your own journey, we're here to keep you moving forward. Let's dive in. Today, I welcome Mike Eischer, the founder and CEO of One World Supply Chain Consulting. Mike is a seasoned supply chain professional with over 30 years of experience in supply chain management, logistics, and procurement. Known for his expertise in driving operational excellence and delivering strategic solutions, he excels at enhancing customer value, optimizing processes, and reducing waste. Throughout his career, Mike has successfully built best-in-class supply chain organizations by improving efficiencies, cutting costs, and enhancing overall performance. His motivation, proactive approach, and strong decision-making skills ensure exceptional customer service and drive business success. Mike, welcome to Might in Motion.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the kind introduction.
You know, I have really been looking forward to this. We met probably about a month or so ago, maybe longer now, and finally got all of our schedules aligned, which really kind of reminds me of supply chain, right? Everybody's got a crazy schedule going on. Recently, you posted on LinkedIn about a traveling t-shirt. And I don't know if you remember this post, but
Yep.
I loved it. I'm like, oh, I want that t-shirt of the t-shirt you posted, right? It's amazing how things kind of get from point A to point B. So I really want to know what got you excited about supply chain? What got you interested in learning different parts of the traveling t-shirt? And how can new leaders share that joy of supply chain?
Sure. Yeah, that was a fun post to write for sure. There's no question, because it's like you got to think about different things to think about, and the t-shirt resonates with people of our era, right? That can recognize those different technologies. But I mean, for me, it started out of college. So I went to school for supply chain at Michigan State. I was originally going to be a CPA, follow my dad's footsteps, but accounting classes weeded me out, so I was not fit for it. So just back when I graduated, that it was still a newer field, and they were hiring, and I wanted to get a job out of college. So that was my first motivation. My motivation was being employed. But ever since then, it has been a phenomenal place and a phenomenal career for me. I've learned so many different things, and that's what I loved about it. Is there's so many different things you can learn about our industry, and there's so many different verticals you can work in. There's warehousing, there's international, there's freight forwarding. You can be a carrier. So there's just so many different pieces of the supply chain, and when you can see it all, and when you put it all together and you see it working and flowing, it's just it's like an orchestra that's playing a symphony. It's just perfect, and that's what excites me. It excites me to see teams that are motivated and they get to see it. When they experience it, seeing your teams like excel is what really drives me. I love that. So it's a fun place to be.
Yeah, that resonates with me because, similarly being able, and I look back at my supply chain career of everything from inventory to international, domestic, technology on this now from a supply chain perspective, being, like you said, seeing everything, seeing that orchestra of how things move, right? It is fun. And there's always a challenge. There's never a day without a challenge.
No. And I've always told people that go into this industry, you got to have a thick skin, because nobody ever calls you when things are going well, right? They're always calling you when there's a problem. So, and what I've loved about it is the different industries and the different worlds I've experienced. Like, if you'd have told me I spent time in the cement industry in my career, I'd have been like, that doesn't sound like fun at all. But that was probably one of the most fun and transformational times I've ever had in my career. So,
yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that, because that was one of the questions I wrote down. I had a career changing experience working at a paper mill, and what you're dealing with a union, and you're dealing with everything else. And you mentioned a cement company, but I really want to know, what's the story behind that?
Well, I got to give my boss, the man who hired me, credit. So his name's David Looms. And so David took a chance. He recognized, in my opinion, that they needed folks that were not just cement people, they were supply chain experts. So they had cement people running supply chain, and no disservice to those folks that were doing it. They were doing what they could. So, but myself, and then he allowed me to bring other individuals in. So we had just this cohesive team of individuals that knew the industry very well and individuals that knew supply chain strategy very well. So it was phenomenal that the opportunities that we would just bounce back and forth. And what I discovered was, and that's been true throughout my career, and there's a kind of a funny story about that, but the strategies that you use are not dissimilar from automotive than cement. I mean, you would think they'd be different because it's bulk versus, automotive auto parts, but you still got to get stuff from point A to point B, and there's only so many ways to do that. So, but the story I learned, one thing I did learn is my very first sales meeting I sat in with the sales team, and I made the mistake of saying it's just a commodity to me, and all of them were like I punched their grandmother or something like that. So they were just so, and I realized it's somebody's passion. So I got to realize that's their lifeblood, that's their passion. So treat it with the respect it deserves. And I do that now with every client is unique, every opportunity is unique, every supply chain is unique. So treat it uniquely. And yes, you still got to get it from point A to point B, but there are unique pieces of every supply chain. So yeah, it's a great experience. One of the best of my career.
That's awesome. You think about who you interact with and you say, oh, it's just a commodity, and that had an impact to them. I work every day almost with truck drivers, right? And it's amazing when you approach a truck driver and you're side by side with them at their door, right? And you're like, do you mind if I step up on your cab, right? Like that's their office, that's their in some cases their home for weeks at a time, and all of a sudden you just kind of see this change because you're recognizing them. You're recognizing them as people, right? Not just a cog, and you're actually have a purpose. And if you see somebody with multiple million miler safety records, right, and being able to, hey, congratulations, that takes a lot of work, and it goes a long way.
It's an amazing accomplishment. And I made the analogy one time. We were driving my son. We were moving my son down to Raleigh, North Carolina. So it's about 11-hour drive. And so we did the 11 hours in a day. And I said, imagine doing that and more 5 to 6 days a week. And that's how difficult that job is. And they don't get enough respect for the job that they do. And without them, our economy would grind to a halt. So, they need to be appreciated more than they are.
Yeah. We're really talking about people. And I've always, for me, supply chain has always been a people business. It's not necessarily a trucking business or a ocean carrier business. It's all about the people. Right. How do you think about having that customer first mindset? How does that really help supply chain teams win?
Well, I think fortunately I've been a customer, being on the shipper side, so I've seen that firsthand and what that looks like. So I can appreciate what motivates a customer and what their pain points are, maybe more than someone who's spent their whole career on the service provider side. So what I will tell you, it's a different pace. It's certainly, as we all know, the 3PL world is a breakneck pace. There's never a dull moment. So the shipper side, it was actually an adjustment. It was like we were doing all these phenomenal things, and at some point it's like, okay, we've done everything, and they're like, man, we're going so fast. And I felt we were going slow, but it's just a different world because you're focused on one specific client. Whereas in the 3PL world, you may have 5, 6, 10 clients that you're trying to work for. So the pace of what we do I like that because I like the pace. I like to keep busy. I think it keeps you going. So, but yeah, it's a crazy industry for sure. So
if you were talking to a new leader, how would you maybe help guide them to have that customer first mindset?
Well, I think you really got a new leader. The new leader transition is the hardest thing to make, in my opinion, because you're used to being a doer, and then you become a leader. And there were days I remember coming home. It's like I didn't do anything. I didn't have any tangible results. And you guys sit there and say, "Am I making an impact?" But your leadership is what makes an impact. So that's the first thing. It's helping them transition as a leader. But I would say it's all about listening. Again, listening to clients and their pain points, because we too often want to talk and we want to say, client says something, it's like, oh, I know, I got an idea, so I want to get my idea out, but we may not listen to the whole story, so we may miss something. We're a service-based industry, and we oftentimes try to push our clients into our square peg instead of looking at their round hole, right? So we've really got to be able to be nimble enough to adapt to what their pain points are. And their pain points this year may be different than next year, right? Because the market, I mean, look at where we're at today. The markets are changing consistently. So having that adaptability is key for a new leader.
Yeah. And it is a hard one to make that transition. It's probably one of the hardest. I love that thought process of like, you have to kind of start accepting that you're not the doer. You have to find the wins of being a really good leader and listening to what those other options are. That's awesome. So you mentioned kind of the environment we're in now, and at the time of this recording, tariffs are all the rage. Everybody's talking about, what are they going to do and how are they going to combat, tariffs that are coming down the pipe or already here. Number one, do you actually think that that's the biggest challenge out there for companies today? And how do you help teams navigate these kind of crises?
Sure. Yeah. Answer your first question is yes. I think that's the biggest thing on anybody that's manufacturing or pulling product or parts or raw materials from another country, that is top of mind, because even though they paused tariffs in all but one, it's a 90-day pause. So we don't know what's going to happen in 90 days. And as what I know, you don't negotiate a trade deal in 90 days. So there's going to be further things that are going to come. So it's a tumultuous time. A lot of customers are struggling with what to do, and a lot of them are like, they're struggling what to do, so they're not doing anything, and that's probably the worst thing you can do. So we're trying to help them explore. Okay, first of all, do you know your total landed cost? Do you know all your cost elements? And many of them know most of them, but they may not be thinking of cost of capital or inventory carrying costs, or even your cost of currency, things that maybe aren't direct expenses, but can affect your total cost, right? So we're building, we built a model that it's not a model, it's probably a loose term, but for every part, so a plan for every part, basically, the old PFEP, and looking at the cost structure for each of those parts, and then figuring out, are there better sourcing alternatives available? South America, Mexico, Canada, and just at least doing the due diligence to say, this product exists in Brazil, so can we make it in Brazil, and what's the cost? What's the opportunity to do that? So having them make informed decisions and having a true category strategy that they can implement. That's what we're trying to get folks to do. And then oftentimes, if there's opportunities to resource, then we'll work down that path, and whether we do sourcing events for them or what have you. But that's what we're trying to help them. And we tell them, now's as good a time. There's no bad time to start. So if you don't start, you're always going to be behind. So start now, at least start building the process, so you're at least can make informed decisions.
Yeah, it's the best time to plant a tree is yesterday and today, right? So you're absolutely right. Like, making some of those decisions. Do you think we'll see, there sounds like a lot of kind of near shoring, and I think of South America as being near shoring, even though it's pretty darn far away. But what about bringing more manufacturing within the United States? Do you foresee that happening?
I see some. I expect that some will happen. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I do know that manufacturing plants take 18 to 36 months to build, right? And there's a whole host of things that have to happen for that to happen, right? So this isn't something that happens overnight. But they're also, I think it's going to be more driven by automation than it will be by people. And that's my opinion, because I think a lot of people don't want to do those types of roles anymore. We've become a different country, different culture. We're more of a tech and innovation, healthcare, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know that people are going to want to go back to that type of work. So while I do think it's good to have manufacturing have an industrial base, but I don't necessarily think that we're necessarily an industrial country anymore from that perspective. And I don't know if that's a bad thing. I'm not smart enough to know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think there's got to be a balance there, I guess.
Yeah. Do you think with the 90-day pause, would you expect a higher level of like direct imports? So companies just trying to pull forward as much inventory as possible and therefore needing more warehouse space, more trucking, like all the things, right? Because you have to put it somewhere. It can't always go on a store shelf.
Yeah, absolutely. You're definitely seeing that people are going to try and buy up as much as they can ahead of ahead of the tariffs going into effect. And you saw that certainly. You heard the case about iPhones flying over,
Mhm.
all that good stuff. We've talked to a couple people that we're working with down in South America. They're getting calls from manufacturers saying, "Hey, I need help with product. Can you guys help us?" And they're starting to get overwhelmed with requests. And the challenge for them is going to be, okay, let's not take every single one because we're going to overwhelm ourselves. We're not going to be able to
Yeah.
produce, and then we're gonna hurt ourselves. And depending upon what region of the country they've got to figure out ways to the logistics isn't always as good in some of those areas to get the product here effectively. So we're
Yeah.
trying to help a couple organizations in that way to help them find alternative ways to import the material as well.
That's exciting. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that gets me like fired up because it's really interesting. And,
Yeah,
in a former life, there was always conversations too about, all the building blocks of that product, right? All the way to, where was the raw materials sourced from and where was a tree cut down or the yarn made or whatever, right? It wasn't
yeah,
just about the actual manufacturing of the product. And there's a lot of vetting, right, that goes into that. It's not just something that overnight that you are sourcing from places where you're avoiding some really nasty things,
yeah.
right?
Kind of goes back to the t-shirt thought. All the stuff that goes into that t-shirt. There's so much more than just the t-shirt itself, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Before, when we were in the green room before we started recording, you said something that also resonated, and I kind of say never waste a good crisis, right? So like right now there's a lot of focus on tariffs, but as you go down the rabbit hole of knowing the full, like, your full cost of goods, right,
Mhm.
what other opportunities are out there? So how are you helping people identify, or companies identify, those opportunities that may not be tied to tariffs and imports?
Yeah, we want to tell them, okay, let's not just, yes, that's the immediate issue that's in front of us, but they're also, let's look at the other opportunities within your organization and operations to streamline and make your other areas more effective if they're struggling, right? I'm not suggesting that everybody is, but now is a good time to refine your entire supply chain. Take advantage of different avenues, whether it be warehousing. If you have a private fleet, what you can look at with
Mhm.
that, your third party carrier agreements, even your footprint, your warehousing footprint. Do you have them in the right spot?
Mhm.
Yeah. So we're really trying to help folks. So, because we know the easy button is let's just pass those costs on to our customer, right? And that's the easy thing to do. And you can't blame a company for doing that because they got to stay profitable. But why not also try to mitigate as many of those costs as you can so you don't have to pass it all on to your customer, and B, if your competition does, you have an opportunity to pick up market share because you're a lower cost alternative because you've done the other work, the heavy lifting to streamline your operation. And a lot of those can be quicker wins. Sourcing can take
Mhm.
time, but supply chain efficiencies within your operational side can be done very much more quickly. 30 to 90 days usually we can get quick wins out of the deal. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I one of the great things about spending time in different parts of the supply chain world is that you can start working with others that are in maybe different spaces. So I always found, like, if you could pull your merchant along, or the whoever's doing the inventory buying to the table, and bring the actual vendor to the table, you end up with some really cool ideas that can actually benefit all parties
yeah,
instead of like thinking about things in a silo.
right. And we always certainly in my own career, I always was made it clear that I want my team to celebrate and come up with ideas too, because some of the best ideas are people within your organization. And if they don't feel like they have a voice and they're
Mm,
empowered to bring those forward, you're going to leave stuff on the table. And I've seen that firsthand with some of my teams that if you empower and trust your team, you're become your servant leader. That word is used a lot, but I believe you give them the tools to be successful, they'll be successful. If you trust them and trust that they can do the job, they'll go through walls for you because they know that you have their back.
How do you like guide a new leader, somebody who's just moved from doer to leader,
Mm-hmm.
to start building that trust with their team?
I mean, that's a unique skill, right? That's not something
Mm-hmm.
that's something it takes time, because there's a lot of different today's world. From a leadership perspective, you have to know everybody on an individual basis. You have to be
Yeah.
empathetic to each person's situation. It's gone are the days where you could kind of peanut butter spread your leadership style and just kind of demand that this is what gets done. So you've got to see what motivates each individual. And so I think for new leaders, and that's going to be even harder because it's a different world from a social media
Mm-hmm.
perspective, being able to have that true empathetic discussions one-on-one, having those, heartfelt discussions, giving them honest feedback. I mean, people want honest feedback. They want to, I want to know what I'm doing wrong so I can grow from it, or not doing wrong. Maybe that's the wrong word, but I want to be able to grow from my failure. We usually grow more from our failures than we do our successes. So, fail fast and forward, they say, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I love the term radical candor. I think there's a whole book with that title too. But yeah, I will even tell people like, hey, you're gonna get a lot of radical candor from me. And we'll do it one-on-one or whatever. But like it's amazing how people are like, oh man, thanks, right? Like I'm trying to help you not step on a landmine.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know? And that might be today, or it might be 3 years or 13 years from now, but hopefully this feedback is gonna resonate, you know.
Yeah. And I was fortunate early on in my career. I had a very strong mentor, and
Mhm.
I really learned how to lead from him. And he was a people leader. I mean, so I had a bad leader when I was early in my career too. And he was the kind that basically yelled at me up and down in a room one time. And that's where I knew I was going to leave. But
Mhm.
the mentor was awesome. I mean, he just showed me how to be empathetic, learn, and create a team culture and a team environment. You got to have fun at work, in my opinion. If you don't have fun
Yeah.
at work, then why are you doing it, right? And it's not always easy. Sometimes it's stressful. We know the supply chain can always be stressful, but you still got to enjoy your successes and celebrate the wins.
Yeah, 100%. So if you could look forward 5 years from now or 10 years from now, where do you see Mike in the future?
I see him much more well versed on AI for sure.
Mhm.
Um, I see myself still doing what I'm doing. I love what I'm doing. I love being in the supply chain. I mean, it's been a career that I've always told people, outside to be a professional baseball player, which left me long ago, the opportunity. I couldn't have asked for a better career. Just the opportunity to work in all these different types of companies, different great people. You get to meet a ton of great people. So I see myself doing the same thing in 10 years, because I don't feel this is a job. I feel like it's something I enjoy doing.
Mm.
So why stop?
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I mean, I always encourage like young folks coming up to consider supply chain because you can have fun.
Yeah.
You know, there's something so gratifying when I go into a store and I can be like, I remember when that Christmas tree was just an idea, like in China, and it was being picked, and it got picked, and look at it now. It's a beautiful Christmas tree in a store, right? And
Yep.
it
I
took
know.
12 months for that to happen, but it's so cool to
Yep.
know that you got it there. It's the t-shirt that you're wearing, that you saw it all the way through, right?
Yeah. No, one of my partners and I, we go to Central Michigan twice a year, Central Michigan University, and we talk to students, and it's just open dialogue. And I tell them, look, everyone wants to work for the companies, they want to work for the Nikes, they want to work for Lululemon, whatever. But I tell you, like I tell a cement story. One of the best times in my career was working for a cement company, and you would have never gotten me to believe I would have worked in a cement industry out of college. But
Yeah.
so I tell them, don't discount industries that you might not think are interesting, because those might be the most interesting things you'll ever work in. So
Yeah.
um, be curious. Tell them to just be curious, right? So
I
it,
love that.
yeah,
Yeah, you don't want to discount those opportunities because you learn so much when you're willing to
yep,
take that risk and be uncomfortable.
yep,
Um,
exactly.
yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. So I always have my little handy pen and I try to scribble down notes. So you mentioned AI, like, yep, I am like the real life chat GPT, I guess, over here. But I always like to scribble down notes that resonate with me from our conversation today. So I just want to recap some of them because we've covered a lot.
Sure.
And, I think that's what's so much fun about supply chain is you can cover so much.
Yep.
So we talked a little bit about, how you've spent time being a shipper and being, a customer, and that pace has allowed you to really keep and maintain the strong pace that you need to have in the supply chain world, especially on the consulting side. And that, the hardest thing, in your career was moving from like that doer to a leader. And I think that resonates with a ton of listeners who are in that middle management space for the first time. And you really got to focus on how do you make an impact to your people, to your clients, to, the team as a whole, and listening to their pain points. And that I love that because it's not just about the team you lead. It could be about maybe a customer that you're supporting. Right. And if you don't wait and hear the whole story, you're going to miss something that is really, really important
Right.
to understanding their true root problem. We talked a little bit about, your career path and how you had this wonderful opportunity with a cement company, which you had somebody who was willing to take a chance on somebody who wasn't in the cement industry. And that allowed, you to really have an impact to their supply chain strategy, but also for you to learn from people that were those cement experts. So, when you have a seat at the table, like bring others with you that may not be exactly like you, because you're going to find some really cool synergies and growth opportunities. And then how do you pass that on, right? How do you be that person that's willing to take the risk on, that young guy coming in that has these big ideas and hey, maybe that's the right thing to have at the table.
Yeah.
We talked about a little bit about, tariffs and how companies are trying to figure out, like, how do we navigate that? Do we do nearshoring? Do we bring stuff into the United States? But also don't just look at the tariff piece, look at your whole big picture, because that margin that you make profit off of, right, could come from a lot of different ways.
Right.
And I think sometimes people forget that. So that was really awesome. You talked about how a new leader and building that team for a new leader is getting to know their individuals within their team and guide those individuals based on them as a person, and being willing to give honest feedback. That's going to allow you to really build trust and empower your team when you're in that kind of new leadership role. Sometimes those key things are hard to know because
Yep.
you're so used to being the super doer, right? And I also love that you're like, as you look ahead, you're like, man, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. Like, you're enjoying it, you're loving it. And I love that, because I think it's an opportunity for a lot of people, especially, folks that are in college now, or maybe they're just starting off and, they've done 2 years in HR and they're like, I'm not sure this is it. Well, hey, maybe try supply chain. It's a people
Yep.
business, right? The things you learned in one space will connect somewhere else. So those are some of the highlights that I wrote down from our conversation. If people are really interested in learning more about you, connecting with you, with your consulting firm, or getting to know you better, is the best way to go to LinkedIn or to oneworldsc.com, or both?
Or both, or they can email me directly at my email too. It's mike@oneworldsc.com. That's fine too. I always tell people conversations are complimentary. They don't cost a thing. So, I'm always happy to have conversations and talk to people. And what I love about networking and talking to people is the authenticity of what you get to learn from people. And oftentimes it's just a great connection, and I get to learn about a business that I didn't know anything about. So I enjoy that immensely.
That is awesome. I definitely challenge people, take action, connect with Mike, follow him on LinkedIn. He's got a lot of really great content. And if you want to learn more about what he does in the supply chain world, please connect with him about that as well. Thank you again for your time today. I really appreciate it, Mike. It's been great to get to know your background story a little more and how you look to the future of supply chain.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. I always enjoy talking about it.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Might in Motion. Remember, every step forward counts, and the power to create momentum starts with you. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review. It makes a huge difference. Until next time, stay inspired, stay mindful, and keep moving with might.